Let's go through a mock consulting session where you are my client. You are in the beginning stages of an ADA Title II compliance project. You are working towards compliance with the new web accessibility rule, and you have hired me as your consultant to help you with this project. So now we are starting our consulting session. We have 8 different talking points on the whiteboard. And so let's go through those different points, starting with point one, project objectives. What do we hope to accomplish from this project? Well, obviously, we want to make sure that our digital assets and our digital content are WCAG 2.1 AA conformant, but we want to reach conformance efficiently. So we want to make sure that we don't spend any more time or any more money that is necessary to reach conformance. We also want to develop proficiency and expertise in-house. Another bullet point is to streamline our processes to make sure we implement WCAG 2.1 AA. And then we want to significantly reduce our costs of accessibility after the first 1 to 2 years of this project. All right, so let's move on to talking point two. How do we measure success? Well, one way we can measure success is that we meet our milestone deadlines. Another way we measure success is that our accessibility coordinator is essentially giving us B plus reviews on our work or better, right? Or better. So with reviews, our accessibility coordinator is going to overlook our progress. They're going to overlook the work that has been done and really give us a sign off that we are doing a good job. We also want to make sure that we are staying within our budget and that our project is completed ahead of time. The last thing we want to do is be in the last 3 months before our compliance deadline and still trying to figure out accessibility. So on the sticky note I have for point two, beat the deadline. That's really key. We want to be ahead of the deadline. We don't want to procrastinate and wait and try to meet the deadline, because if we do that, accessibility has a way of taking longer than we think. All right, moving on to talking point three, project difficulties. What difficulties might we come across? Well, one difficulty is in finding a good service provider who provides excellent services. Another difficulty can be in appointing an accessibility coordinator. We need to find the right person to organize and direct our accessibility efforts. We may also experience project difficulties in having leadership buy-in. If our leadership, if our directors don't buy into accessibility, it can make this project extremely difficult in a number of ways. One way is there won't be a prioritization of accessibility during the procurement process. Another way is we won't have the necessary budget to implement all of our accessibility measures. Another way is we might not have the culture established to make sure that accessibility is a priority. Because if our leaderships, if the directors aren't taking accessibility seriously, that's going to permeate throughout the organization. And so as a result, different employees, staff, and contractors also will not take accessibility seriously. We may also have difficulty in taking inventory, particularly when it comes to documents and PDFs. And another difficulty can be working with our existing technology providers. So whoever provides our platform, any portals that we are using, any apps that we are using that come by way of a provider, we need to make sure that our tech providers are going to be able to help meet our accessibility needs. So they're going to be responsive to our requests. So moving on to point four, project risks. And by the way, I had one sticky note on project difficulties. Hiring the right coordinator is going to be key to all of this, because this person is going to be in charge of our entire effort. So we need to make sure that we have someone that we can really trust and rely upon. All right, back to point four, project risks. What are we at risk of? Where do risks present themselves during the course of this project? Well, bad services for one. Let's say we outsource our PDF remediation and we get back inaccessible documents. That's definitely a risk. Another risk is that we go over our budget. So we need to make sure that we can budget appropriately and conservatively. Another project risks are delays. If we wait on our project, it is very likely that the accessibility service providers are going to be full with requests. And so it's not only going to make it more expensive, but it's going to likely push back the deadline for, let's say, audit and remediation and user testing services. So we are at risks of delays. Also, software presents a risk because it's a distractor. We need to be aware of what we need for accessibility, which is manual services, and aware of what we don't need, which is software. So software presents a risk in and of itself. So does platforms. These can waste money and they can create distractions. So we need to be aware of the technology that presents risk to our project, because we buy the technology hoping that it makes us, WCAG 2.1 AA conformant, or helps us in our efforts towards conformance, but it really doesn't. So on the sticky point for number 4, I have manual services, because manual services are what are necessary for WCAG 2.1 AA conformance. We cannot get there with technology. All right, so moving on to point 5, I actually have 2 different blocks set out for point 5, and one block is 5.1, and it is for common fail points. So where can we fail in our project? Well, with contractors and vendors, for one. So again, back to delays, we may also have non-responsive replies. So we might get responses like, we're looking into accessibility, we're looking into WCAG 2.1 AA conformance, those type of replies. That can be a fail point, and we need to decide early whether or not we are going to continue with existing technology providers. Also, again, with accessibility technology, if we are distracted by paying for scans, using scans, even on the talking point of scans, if we are using a scan, why are we using it? Have we outsourced the audit to a service provider? If we have, then why are we using scans right now, right? Why have we purchased a scan? Are we using plugins? We need to make sure we don't use any widgets. We don't use any plugins. We don't use any apps for accessibility. We don't use any software for accessibility unless it's furthering our efforts. So we need to make sure that we are not rushing into accessibility technology, because in most cases, it's just going to be a waste of money, and it's going to be a distraction, which wastes time. So these are some of the common fail points where we can lose during our project. But where can we pick up wins? Well, in 5.2, we have some great signs that our project is on the right path. So if we get back an audit report, and the audit report looks detailed, it looks good, it's on time, that's a really great sign, because it tells us we are working with a service provider who is paying attention to detail. They are working in an expedited manner, and they are making sure they get us our deliverables on time. Another good sign is if the platform that we're using, or the existing technology that we're using, they already have a VPAT or ACR in place. The ACR looks good. It has details. It's filled out. You can tell attention to detail went into it. You can tell a lot of effort went into it. That's a really, really good sign. And then the next bullet point I have is attention to detail. I keep saying that because the details are important. Keep in mind there are 50 success criteria to WCAG 2.1 AA. Those success criteria are multi-layered and oftentimes have exceptions, or at least many times have exceptions and layers to them. So we need to pay attention to detail, because we are working towards WCAG 2.1 AA full conformance for multiple digital assets and multiple different types of digital content. Another great sign is that we have updates to our development and content processes within house. And then we see that the accessibility policy is being built upon, refined. There aren't too many deadlines are being kept. These are all really, really good signs. So as our accessibility policy becomes better, we hone in on exactly what we need for accessibility. We refine it, we update it. Those are all really good signs that this project is right on track to where it should be. All right, moving on to point 6. Who is involved? The teams and people involved. Leadership needs to be involved. We definitely need to have an accessibility coordinator who is going to be at the center of all of our efforts. We need to have a technical lead, a content lead, and a compliance lead, optionally a compliance lead. We don't need to have all of these people necessarily, especially if you are a smaller entity, but we need a coordinator at the very least, and then likely someone who is leading the technical efforts, and then likely who is someone who is leading the efforts around content. So that's who's going to be involved. Let's move to point 7 now. Where can we pick up project wins? So I already talked about great signs. These great signs lead to project wins. So what are some project wins right away? Well, we have 5 content exceptions. So this means that there's certain content that we don't even have to worry about for our project. So what are the 5 content exceptions? Well, let's go to accessible.org, and there's a post titled Web Content Exceptions under the new Title II rule. And if we just look to the table of contents, we can see that there are exceptions for archived web content, pre-existing electronic documents that are not currently active, content posted by independent third parties, individual password protected documents, and pre-existing social media posts. That is already a win, because that is already that much content that we don't have to worry about. And by the way, I will provide you a link to this content exceptions post in the description. But back to our consulting session. What are other project wins? Well, we can start immediately. So if we start right now, that's already a win, because we're ahead of the game. We can eliminate certain technology or technology from our concerns, because we don't need to worry about getting software. We don't need to worry about buying a scan. We don't need to worry about any plugins, apps, or widgets. We already know that those are going to be distractions at best. money wasters at worst, time wasters at worst. So we don't need to worry about that. We can just focus in on manual services. Also, we're going to get a win because our budget is going to drop after 2 years. Why? Because we have developed proficiency and expertise in house. That expertise is going to come as a result of experience. So as we are working on this project, we know that we are going to reduce our costs once the project hits the 1 or 2 year mark, because internally we're going to be developing that expertise and we won't need to source out as many manual services. Also, there's a win in that we have recent technological updates with artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is going to be able to help in our content accessibility. And so that is also going to reduce our costs so we can train our team to use AI, leverage AI, and that is going to help us with accessibility. All right. And so finally, talking point 8, project to-dos. What do we need to be concerned with? Well, obviously, we need to appoint a coordinator if we haven't done so already. We need to assemble a really good accessibility committee, and this committee is going to have the technical lead, the content lead, and any other people that are as a part of the accessibility group that is working on accessibility. They're going to be on our committee. Ideally, we will have someone from compliance and someone from leadership that is there to participate, and really hopefully that we have someone participating from a representative from all departments. We need to take inventory of our digital assets. We need to set a budget. We need to create an accessibility policy. We need to find a service provider, because initially we just don't have the experience, expertise, and infrastructure to take care of WCAG 2.1 AA conformance. Remember, we're going to need an audit. We're going to need remediation. We'd likely want to have user testing, especially because user testing is going to be great for documentation of our efforts and ensuring that we have made our websites. Our websites and our other digital content, we have made them accessible. Even if there are minor instances of nonconformance, we have proof that our assets are accessible. So user testing will also be important. And then we also want to reduce our work. So we want to familiarize ourselves with these different content exceptions so we know what we need to work on and what we don't. And so that's going to play right into taking inventory. So now that we've gone through these talking points, you have a really good idea of the different things that you need to be thinking about during your ADA compliance project. So I will include resources in the description, including training, because you're going to need training throughout your project to make sure that you not only reach WCAG 2.1 AA conformance, but that you stay conformant. And training is how we're going to develop the proficiency and expertise in-house. Training alongside experience is really going to help with that, and it's going to help us streamline our processes. So this is everything that we're doing now is going to pay off both now and later, not just for compliance, but for reducing our accessibility budget. So there are so many resources to help you with ADA Title II compliance, and I will link to those resources in the description.